Welcome all. Good morning from me. I never do podcasts in the morning. Well, sometimes. Oh well. Today we've got someone that's got a huge, hefty bio. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs, and then we're just going to get to know him. He's from Australia. Yeah,
I am. Brisbane, Australia.
Brisbane, Australia. I actually know someone that's someone else who's from Brisbane, Australia as well. So yeah,
Well,
I need to connect you two.
sounds happy to.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have got Clint Adams. He is a former Victorian police officer who studied psychology and later rehabilitation counselling. His police counselling, injury management, senior HR roles, and working with asylum seekers have made him develop insights into the psychology and social interactions of individuals in trying conditions. He's developed various behavioural and leadership programs to help people deal with various issues from PTSD to bullying and harassment. He's a keynote speaker on suicide prevention and diversity and runs programs on mental health and well-being for corporate organisation and sporting organisations for teenagers. He is the author of a book called Lighting the Blue Flame. The book is written as a story of a teenager who commits suicide because of being bullied, but wants his death to at least have an impact to change things so it doesn't happen to others. So he decides to send those he believes are responsible for him being bullied. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good introduction.
I know. You're the first to actually say that. Anyway. So, we want to start with obviously your life as like obviously before you became like a police officer. Like, what was your experience like?
Before I became I got into the police because I studied psychology. I was very interested. This is in the 90s. I started, even showing my age now, but late 80s, early 90s was when I did my psych degree. And back then, the reason I got into psych, I was very interested in, the serial killers and stuff like that. Silence of the Lambs was a massive book back then. I got really interested
Yeah.
in all that stuff. It was very new around the world, and so I was kind of interested in that side of it. And so there was the criminality element of psychology and obviously policing that interested me. So joined the police force. I won't bore you with details, but about 5 and a bit years in, I realised that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I got really interested in the true counselling side of
Hmm.
psychology, one-on-one dealing with people's problems and trying to help them. And so I did more studies after that to do rehabilitation counselling. And then I got into that field in a different business, left the police force. I was doing a lot of work for the police in the company that I was with because they were outsourcing that stuff. And that's kind of, they dragged me back to Victoria Police to kind of not head it up, but I was part of the team that were heading up that process. It was fairly new, health and safety and
Yeah.
health and well-being, and even doing our own counselling in-house was very new. So that's how I got back into the police. And then through the police, I did a lot of that work, but then also got into developing programs with how we help our police officers to tactically disengage when they're highly aggressive, and looking at different ways to, we see the Black Lives Matter issue where, the police officers obviously overstep the mark with the amount of force used.
Yeah.
And so, it's got to be obviously proportionate to the threat that's coming towards you. And, you make these decisions real quick. So some of the stuff we were working on there was about how you make those decisions quickly, how you calm yourself down quickly, how you as your partners working together and teams working together to calm each other down. So a lot of that stuff gave me a very good grounding for understanding human behaviour, and I got really interested in a lot of that. And then going in and working in workplaces, you're dealing with, you think you're dealing with things that are different, but they're not. You're dealing with people every day, dealing with HR, change
Mm.
management, leadership, and they're all, when you really boil it all down, you're dealing with adults in the workplace, but we've all been kids, so it's a lot of stuff that follow you through life. And listening to one of your previous people that have been on your show, him explaining how, you know, what happened to him as a young person, and him taking on what other people want, him following a life that other people want. He had to grapple with that internally. And
Yeah.
a lot of people have these struggles, for various reasons. Some people are gay and they have problems coming out because of the culture they're in. So there's all these things. We have our inner struggles. And so for me, it was a lot of what can I do at a work level, working with people who, they come to work. And when I used to run sessions with these people, because they were kind of new stuff, they'd come and talk to me afterwards and say, hey, Clint, I struggle with mental health. I can't tell my boss, even though I'm the HR manager for the organisations that I've worked with.
Yeah.
They'll talk to me, and so you get a lot of insight with people feeling comfortable to talk to you because this is what you're talking about, and you know about it. And I've had them ask me to come and talk to their kids or their grandkids at home around explaining how we can change some of that. So a lot of my, I guess, where I'm ending up now in the last 2 years, or especially the last 12 months more so, writing the book, doing this work,
Yeah.
really focusing on schools and helping people, have come from, I guess, the adults telling me how much it's impacting and helping them. And so me now reverting back and going, well, what can we do earlier on, and focusing on that aspect of it. So that's kind of, where I'm at and why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I bet you lose sleep over actually some of these stories you actually hear, don't you?
Yeah, look, it's a funny one because look, when it's like police, people ask me about the police days, and obviously, I've been in police long enough as a cop to see some pretty horrendous things. And I guess we have different coping mechanisms as police, and certainly first responders. I'm talking about firemen and all that kind of stuff. It's not always pretty when you get there, and things. Obviously, you get called for the not so good things, and cutting people out of cars and all kinds of stuff. And I've certainly seen a lot of that. But then when I look at suicide prevention as a specific thing, I kind of go, a lot of this is preventable. Like, listening to your podcast before with Chris being on there talking about how he thought about it, but if someone had helped him earlier on in his piece, things could have been very different for him. Maybe he didn't know how to help himself, so he didn't. And then, it progressed, and obviously he got what he needed later, but it was a lot harder to change that. And that's kind of where I'm from now. I'm used to working with adults. When we talk about counselling, it's quite rare for young children to be going into counselling. I mean, some people do it, but, we have this one model, which is just a medical model. If you're in trouble mentally, go and see a psych or go and see a counsellor and that kind of stuff. And so it's our only go-to. We're a one-trick pony when it comes to this. And you guys were talking about it in that previous podcast too, around there's so much stuff we do in the physical health space. We know about nutrition, we know about doing Pilates, we know about stretching, we know about cardio, we know about weight training. There's personal trainers, there's gyms. That's all from a physical perspective. And then you go, well, what do we got when it comes to mental health? Okay, we got counsellors, and maybe there's some groups. I know you run a group because I heard you guys talking about it, and so, but it's a lot thinner and a lot less information. There's a lot of stuff out there in terms of wanting to find info, but it's like the education department's not really pushing it that hard.
No.
We don't know enough about it. We don't talk enough about it. And that's a big part of the reason that it is kind of that, not unknown, but I call it being unconsciously incompetent, in the sense that you don't know what you don't know. And so, when I run these sessions with the people at the workplace, they come up to you and go, wow, I'm 55 years old. I never knew that's how I thought. I didn't realize I make, thought patterns in my head based on neurons wiring and firing together. And it's like you're talking something crazy that they hadn't ever heard before, and they haven't heard it before. And that's the scary thing, where guys like us have probably been reading this stuff over the years, and you want to do better as a counsellor so you can help people more. And so when people tell me they've never heard any of this, it's like, wow, really? why do we want to know? When once you become consciously, my role here is to help people become consciously incompetent in this space, so they go, crap, I didn't know this stuff, I really should know. How do I find out more? And this is kind of, I wouldn't say a quest that I'm on, but this is certainly where my messaging's coming in, around getting people at least know a bit more about this and go and explore and find out different methods,
Yeah.
because it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously you touched on bullying there, and obviously throughout my education life, I knew I was being bullied. But obviously there's people like me and you, obviously when we was 18, which was decades ago. I'm showing my age now, and I'm only 30 in a couple of weeks. Anyway, I couldn't talk to no one. I couldn't talk to no one because there was that fear. Like, who do I turn to if I want this information? Like, when I was going through the education system, I didn't know mental health actually existed. I didn't, because we're not being taught about it. But there's now kids today that do talk about it. Maybe not enough, but obviously you absolutely bang on the money there, where the education, they need to push mental health there. But I believe so do the NHS as well.
Yeah.
Because I still remember, and I know I mentioned this on the previous podcast, where this was about 2-3 years ago, where I was doing group therapy myself. And it was my first time doing it as a group instead of one-on-one. And I was struggling. I was finding it really hard. And I had a friend telling me, well, if you find it hard, that means it's working. But then when I went to go and see the GP to say, right, I need to talk to you because I'm finding this therapy hard, he turned around saying, right, so why are you doing it? You see, like a friend who's got no experience when it comes to mental health, like no qualification or anything like that. But then there's a GP who's got medical background. He's saying something negative. It's that balance.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that. I had a person who is a GP, and I know him quite well. And they do. I know what they do over in the UK, but they do about 6 years here of study, and literally they would do a 4-week course on mental health as part of this 6 years of training here in Australia. They would touch on for about 4 weeks.
I don't think 4 weeks is enough.
No, clearly not, because it's so interrelated, right? Like if I'm not in a good brain space, my physical health is going to suffer. If I'm stressed and my cortisol levels have gone through the roof, my body is not repairing itself. I'm not getting rest. All that just goes out the window. So, I mean, we talk about a balance, but if you're not right here, for whatever reason, like sometimes, it can be trauma, it could be, whatever. But if you can't handle things, it happens. When I was dealing with people, like, so sometimes you got this, people have this view, and you probably would have seen this, or this is part of the stigma, unfortunately, that's attached to it, is that, certain people can't handle life, blah, 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 and they make it out like it's insignificant and it's a weakness. And this is part of the problem, that people don't talk about mental health, because there's people out there that still say this stuff that's derogatory, that's, they use terms that are nasty. And so people, when we have a fear factor in our whole being about saying whatever it is, and it's a safety issue, because you go, I don't want to be ridiculed, I don't want to be called names, I don't want to be blah, 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 whatever it is. You won't talk about it. And that's one of the reasons mental health is such it's so much slower than saying, hey, I've got, cancer, or I've got, people will talk about their physical ailments a lot more. And so it's a dual issue. There's obviously, obviously different countries are a bit different, but, in Australia, coming from a British kind of background, like you guys have, not dissimilar, they'll stiff upper lip and boys don't cry and all the stuff that come with that stuff. It has an effect, and that's why males tend to have also, a greater suicide rate, because they're kind of seen as, you're the man, you've got to be the tough one, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've had it. I've had it.
So there's all these different aspects that come to it. And so, there's an element of trying to make each person more resilient, but there's also a bigger picture of how we as a society and how we as a group of people can actually work together. We go, hey, I've had days where I'm not so great. If if my grandmother dies, I'm expected to be sad, and I'm allowed to be sad, and there's a grieving process to that. And do people even talk about the grieving process? In my book, I write about that part of it because one of the characters is the mum who finds her son has suicided, and I'm a character in the book helping her deal with the grief and understanding that it's a process. It's like, and I had to do this as a real counsellor where it wasn't a suicide, but I had two police officers, husband and wife, who their son drowned, and he was only like 5 years old, and they had to deal with that stuff. So and tough stuff. This isn't easy. Where life's life,
No.
and no one's going to come out of this without any trauma. Like there's none of us will, life, human frailty. We've got relationships, we've got grandparents, parents, great grandparents in some instances. And so, we need to be able to help each other, deal with those
Yeah,
things. Yes, we can,
yeah,
celebrate life
absolutely. 'Cause
and all that.
yeah, yeah, because it even takes the most positive person, positive-minded person, even they still need help from time to time.
Of course.
And obviously, early February of this year, I lost my uncle, and my partner actually informed me of
Sorry to
that.
hear that.
Yeah, and obviously, I don't know how he passed away. I don't know, but I was in shock, and then quickly snapped into that in denial phase. I'm like, no, it can't have gone just yet. But then next day, that's when it hit me.
Yeah.
That's when it hit me. And then obviously I was sobbing for a good couple of days where I took time off. And then I thought, you know what? Thinking about it logically, what
Yeah.
would he want me to do? And that's why a couple of days later, I jumped back on a podcast and carried on doing what I'm doing good at,
Yeah.
because that's what he would have wanted.
Yeah. And it's funny when we talk about, and I tend to focus on what gets people out of tough times. And there's always that switch of, if you focus on obviously the pain and all that stuff, and there's always going to be a sadness to it. I mean, it's someone's died, it's a loss in your life, especially if you're really close to them. So that'll never disappear. But there's a point where you've got to kind of go, what, like you just said, what would they, something that changes your focus. So you asking that question of yourself, like, he knows you, you know him, you know what he's like. You ask the question and you go, okay, I'm comfortable now that he doesn't want to see me sitting here wallowing around. He wants me to get on with stuff because that's the kind of guy he is. So whatever helps you shift into that focus to the
Yeah,
future will be what works for you. And that's why, I'm not aligned to any specific psych modality around how we deal with it. To me, I kind of treat it a bit like a coaching role when I'm working in HR stuff and working with leaders and trying to help managers. You ask them a lot of questions so that they kind of come up with the solutions that work for them, because one approach doesn't work for everybody. Some people are more timid, so they don't want to be pushed, and it doesn't work for them. Some people like being yelled at, so get in there and get. So whatever motivates you, but you, as a coach, you kind of have to. And I have the same approach when it comes to the different methods of mental health. It's more around saying, this is what I was saying about making people consciously incompetent. When they go, you say, hey, do you know about this stuff? And do you know how? And I kind of talk theory in a broad sense, but then I talk about the practicalities of what that looks like. So, like when I'm dealing with someone with PTSD, for example, the first thing I say is, okay, your brain right now is in a bit of a loop. You're stuck on an event that happened. We're not disagreeing it didn't happen, but we're saying it's now only exists in your brain because it's gone. That time is gone. It's happening in your brain now. And so you can do things with it because it happened. We can't change it, but you can change how you're thinking about it. And so, little things like saying, we all focus right now is on that, what I call red brain. You're in the emotional state of what that memory is bringing back to you. So we need to, your neurons are wiring and firing in the same way every time you think about that event, and it's creating a pattern for you. And that pattern is taking you to a place that's not so great. You're not enjoying it, but let's work on this. So what I want you to do is do some analytical work. I just want you to do a thoughts diary and start writing things down when that thing pops in your head. Just write it down. Just what time it was, what you thought when it pops in your head. And by doing analytical work, you're actually using a different part of the brain. So understanding, so I'm talking to them about this and why we're doing this. So the actual work for them is just do a thoughts diary. All the reason for it, I'm explaining it to them as we're having the discussion. But you find over time, they start to get less and less because now they're actually interrupting the automatic process they were having before. And so, just giving them little things like that to talk about it, understand why we're changing patterns is so important for them. They can do lots of things. It doesn't have to be that. Anything that interrupts that process. I'm not talking about boozing and stuff. I'm talking about things that are practical and can help them. But, anything. I used to even talk about, whenever a thought pops in your head, wiggle your toes. Okay, it sounds stupid, but it interrupts it. It makes it a bit funny, and it's kind of stupid. But at the same time, it's interrupting that process. And then slowly, those neurons are wiring, firing are slightly different than they were before, dragging you back into a bad space. So, that's kind of the stuff I really focus on.
This is why I'm actually planning a podcast. I'm already speaking to a couple of people, inviting them, and they are actually nutritionists themselves. And I've actually called that title Physical and Mental Health versus Mindset.
Yeah.
Because it's three huge things that are all connected, but the majority of the people still believe they're separated.
Yeah,
but they're not.
No, they're not.
And that goes on to me talking about that anger. I was talking to a potential client, and obviously they were firing all this anger at me, and I'm like, okay, I've accepted what you had to say. Now, question yourself: why are you angry at this? Making something huge out of something small.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they were angry at such a person. I can't remember who they were. I think it was the partner at the time. Now, and they wanted them removed out of their lives. So I'm like, right, okay, get a piece of paper. So they did. Get a bowl of water. And they did. And I'm like, right, and get a felt tip. So they did. So write down that person's name on this paper. So they did. Scrunched the paper up. And I'm like, right, put that paper in the water. Right, okay. So leave that for 5 minutes. So we carried on talking. So I'm like, right, after 5 minutes, I'm like, right, go and check on that paper. So they unfold it, and the name was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that. Because that's what it does. And then they were like, oh, okay. Because it's that simple.
Yeah. No, look, you're right around the pattern of fear. Fear and anger obviously go hand in hand. And, I don't know if you've heard of human synergistics. Have you heard of human synergistics?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm accredited to run an LSI in human synergistics, which for people that don't know what it is, it's a 360-degree feedback tool that managers generally use, and you get 360-degree feedback from people that work for you, you work with, and who you report to. But the ultimate aim of the results that human synergistics gather all around the world, it clearly shows that people that have a high fear or high aggression or high passiveness, which again, fight or flight dominance kind of thing, they're in the bottom 10% of management around the world. And their health is also they're a lot less likely when you got that as an undercurrent of fear or anger. When you're fearful, you either come out swinging, fight or flight comes up all the time in the patterns of the stuff I see and the results of all this stuff. So when I'm dealing with leaders at management level and they've got that high aggression stuff, they've got to change. And if you're highly timid and too passive and you're a super people pleaser, as much as people like you, you're not effective enough, and it affects your health. This is where anxiety comes from. People who are highly passive, and they're great people to be around, but they're very empathetic, but they're actually hurt themselves because they're not. Then they don't stand up for themselves. They're not assertive when they get challenged, and they back off and they take on a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of symptoms that come with that, and that's where a lot of anxiety comes from, especially the people that are more timid are harder to find. The real aggressive ones, you kind of know who they are because they're loud, they're aggressive, and you see them pretty openly. But the ones that kind of shy away, they're distant from people, and that's some of the symptoms that they show. And especially when they're younger kids too, like kids who have trauma and they're fearful, they tend to be that super shy kid. So nobody notices them. No one talks to them. They're not friends with anybody. They don't socialize. So, and then obviously they fast forward 20, 30 years, they're the people pleasers that I'm talking about, in the sense that, they just do what everyone says. They become a doormat, and then they go home and hate themselves and have the self-loathing issues that come with that. And, we want to break those patterns and get people to a point where they can at least stand up for themselves, talk to what they want, choose life, choose things that they want, and be more assertive around that. So, for me, it's about just bringing that to the fore and having people understand that, hey, you don't have to be that. Just because your kid's shy at 6 or 7 doesn't mean you shouldn't encourage them to do other things. As a parent, you can take some control. Don't force them out there, but there's different ways of bringing that into their life.
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes on to me asking, because not many people know what suicide is to them. So this is where I ask you, what does suicide actually mean to you?
Well, unfortunately, I've had one of my best friends suicide when I was in my early 20s, and obviously it affected me a lot. I was around the time I joined the police force, so I was actually away for 6, 7 months, actually more than that, because you do certain training after you've left the academy. But anyway, I hadn't seen him for about 6 to 8 months. Very good friend, and yeah, he ended up hanging himself at the age of about 22 or 23, and obviously no one expected it. He was a good looking guy, had a great job, all this blah, blah, blah. But he was a heavy marijuana user. So, I'm assuming that had a massive impact, but it's certainly in my head a lot. But for me, one of the other things that really stick in my head was when, as a cop, you go into people's houses and, you don't get called there for good things. So you're seeing young kids who have either been abused by parents, and all that kind of stuff. And that affects you, because you go, this kid's not going to have a good role model. They're not probably going to live with their parents. Where are they going to end up? Who's going to look after them? How are they going to be robust? And then not only that, when I was working in healthcare, I used to get statistics that showed me 11 and 12-year-olds who were on antidepressants, kids on suicide watch at 12, 13 years old. And then, it's avoidable. Somewhat, if you see a car accident, yeah, sometimes they can be avoidable, but things have happened, right? But when someone makes a decision to take their own life at 12 years old, at any age, look, I can understand when people are in a lot of pain in the future, when they're in their 90s or whatever, and we obviously don't have euthanasia and all that, and that's a totally different debate. But when you've got young people who've got all their lives ahead of them, and they're making it such a final decision on what could be a temporary problem, and a lot of people who have attempted it and been saved and then talk about it have said that they regretted it straight away in some instances, and they go, if it had been final, so yeah, it does strike a chord with me, and it really, it's like, pisses me off, but it probably does piss me off. It's probably the best way to describe it, because I just think, if you can get to more people and just give them that extra bit of time to think, focus, get the right people in their lives, talking to them about stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I guess when you're in that, what I call red brain mindset, you don't look for it. But that's part of the reason I'm really keen on getting people to focus I don't want this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people know when they're in pain. Or people always ask me, oh, what do you look for when you think someone's suicidal? I go, well, what we want to do is create an environment where people who know they're in pain come to you and talk to you, because they go, he gets it. I feel comfortable with him. I feel safe talking to him or her. And that's part of the biggest part of, as a parent, for example, you want to try and at least, create that psychological safety environment for your own child, even though you might have said stuff in the past like, oh, big boys don't cry. And it's a throwaway line, right? As a parent and old school blokes kind of stuff. But, we all make those mistakes, and you look back and go, ooh, you don't think it's going to have that effect. You don't think that's going to sit in your kid's head and go, oh, last time I cried, Dad had a crack at me, so I'm not going to do that again because I don't like being yelled at, or I don't, want Dad on the wrong side of me. And these things affect how we feel psychologically safe or not. So they're key things that, take away messages for parents around being a little bit more, not strategic, but being deliberate about having that conversation. It doesn't matter what I've said in the past, but I've got your back. No matter what's going on, you can talk to me before you do anything that you're worrying about. If you're worried about something, come and talk to me. Come and talk to Mum.
Is that what this pushed you to write this book, Lightning the Blue Flame?
Yeah, definitely a part of it. It probably started when I was in that healthcare role, and it started off as what I thought is a school program. I designed a school program because I saw those stats that I mentioned before about kids being on antidepressants, and I was in an area that was low socioeconomic too. So I looked at it from a risk factors perspective, and you go, here's these kids, no role models. What do they do? So you're going, they may have had trauma in their life too. So you're thinking, okay, the next best thing we can do is when they get to school, can the schools help them with it? So I kind of really focused on those early years of school when things can, nobody knows each other. There's no, I've got the right brands or anything. When you're 6 years old, no one cares about that stuff, right? So you've got about 5 years, 10, 11, they start to think about what they're looking like and their, all that stuff. So you've probably got those early years. So for me, it was focusing on, well, what can I do to help a school environment work on those early years, and what are those, I guess, skills that I think these adults that I work with, that I'm helping them with later on. These are the same kids from 20 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago, same kind of environment. I worked in a lot of, manufacturing environments, so some of them are attracted from people in a low socioeconomic background and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of know the dynamic quite well, and working with them a lot, and people have had parents that haven't been great themselves, and they talk to you about this stuff, and so you get a lot of insight around this. And you mentioned my profile. I've been in a lot of different roles, obviously, but it does give you that opportunity to I guess brush shoulders with different walks of life, senior managers, guys on the floor working in steel, timber, fruit and veg, all that stuff. So, you kind of get a much broader perspective on it. But at the end of the day, we all have similar struggles. I've seen senior managers struggle with their own mental health, got heaps of money, all that stuff, look like they should have no problems going on. People think money just fixes everything, but no, it doesn't. There's added pressure. So yeah, the book definitely comes from that space where it's about explaining. Like in the book, I've kind of focused on a few key things around, obviously the role model perspective, not feeling like you're being heard, obviously being bullied, that's a part of it, but then also the passive bullying where people who aren't actually bullying you, but they're laughing at what the bullying's doing to you, and it sounds funny, and we do it, right? Like, unfortunately, when you see something funny, someone else's misfortune seems to be a good thing, but when it's on you, it's not such a good thing. You talked about being bullied yourself. I had it when I first came over from South Africa to Australia. Looking a bit darker, having a South African accent didn't help. So you kind of cop it, but it's about, I guess, helping us do things at a school level before that becomes issues. You know, you can't stop everything. It's not going to happen. We're human beings. We will probably laugh at people. We'll make jokes at people that are different. But, you know, we're getting better. I think there's a lot, you know, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that being gay was, no one wanted to talk about it or anything like that. And, you know, at least it's becoming more accepted and so it should be. And, you know, there's obviously, you know, gay marriages and all stuff kind of happening, which is awesome. And look, I think racism is probably not that far away either. I think it's people sometimes want to use it as their own agenda, but yeah, look, it's a tough one. Like, you don't know everyone's angle and where they're living can make a big difference. It's just be the people around you that can be racist people, and you think that's the whole world too. So it's always tough.
Yeah. So this leads me on to my final question: is where can people get this book? Because I'm interested now.
Okay, so that's the book there. It's called Lighting the Blue Flame, as you said. Look, it's actually with the UK publishers, so people in the UK should be able to get it. It's with Austin Macaulay, but you can just Google it and Amazon, and everyone has it. So, you know, yeah, just Google Lighting the Blue Flame or my name, Clint Adams. There's another Clint Adams who's got different books. But yeah, I've only got the one. So, but
yeah.
Anyway,
you know what?
Look.
Yeah, we'll look for it. We'll look for it. And all I've got to say is thank you for coming on.
Look, appreciate it, mate. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Please do not be a stranger. Please do not.
No, more than happy to jump on board.
Absolutely. And on that note, I've got no more podcasts coming up this week. Not as I know. I'll probably one will come up at some point. I don't know. But anyway,
well, you take care.
What was that?
I said you take care and have a good night or good afternoon for you. It's nighttime my end.
It's 11:30 in the morning here. It's midday.
Yeah, 9:30 at night for me. I'm living in the future.
I know.
I'm Marty McFly. I'm in the future, talking to you in the past.
Exactly. Right, you have a great night, and I will see you again.
Cheers, Adam.
Bye for now.
Bye.